Welcome to Lax Philly Live, once again on a Thursday evening. I'm Gary Groob, your host, and I am lucky enough to be with Kellen McClurg and Sue.
How we doing?
Sue, how are you?
I'm fabulous. Thanks for asking.
Kellen, how are you?
Doing great. With the exception of the rare rain in May in San Diego, everything's been going great. But thanks for asking.
Cry us a river there. You know, we're still trying to figure out if it's spring here.
A lot of people are, believe me.
We got about 11 minutes of sunshine, then it turns -4, and then it goes to 22, and then it goes. It's really it's weather by Sybil. You know, it makes Sybil look well adjusted. So
terrible.
Now, for those of you watching and wondering what the hell I got on my head, MSL season is starting, and the Brampton Excelsior is the team that I am near and dear to, who I have covered for a number of years. This is their, I'll say, old logo. A little background information. They were the oldest publicly run team in history, over 100 years. And they were sold because they really were dying for some influx of money because they couldn't compete against the Peterboroughs, the Six Nations, who were paying their players. So what they did was they sold it off to Joe Norton, who, to American viewers, I don't know if you know him or not, but he is the owner and founder of Bug Juice, which is one of the top kids drinks, sugary sweet things in the U.S. Now, what he's done is he's done the soccer thing, and he's put his logo on the jerseys. So basically, it looks like the Brampton Bug Juice that's playing. He did the same thing to Owen Sound for the Junior Bees, and now they fought so hard to have the N for the North Stars back on their jerseys. Well, now it's in a little patch on the jersey, and Bug Juice is predominant on the jersey. A lot of upload, a lot of backlash. The pages have been full of people complaining, but I don't know. I guess that's the modern way of things. What do you guys think? Kellen?
Not a big fan of the jersey ads. I mean, I work in professional indoor soccer, so I know all about the jersey ads, but especially in a sport like lacrosse, I think, where it's, I mean, I'm used to hockey games, baseball games, basketball games, and the occasional outdoor game. But obviously, when the finances aren't in line and you're a team that's usually in the red, and stuff like that, you need to find ways to either cut costs, either it's fire sales of players, or in this case, it's reaching out to the community for some type of financial assistance. And I totally see that. I mean, I haven't been a part, but I've seen other teams, maybe locally here, that have come and gone because of finances, and they've had to reach out to the community, or they've had their name around forever, but they've changed their branding plenty of times, or they've been around for like 6 or 7 different incarnations of that certain team name and branding being around. But certainly in a sport like lacrosse, I think where you're used to just, a giant seal being plastered in the front of your uniform. And I just imagine if as someone in the NLL just had like a very teeny tiny patch right here, and the team had their local bank or a brewery on there. It'd be very interesting to see, especially from sitting in press row. You can't see. It's tough to see sometimes down there. But I mean, I totally understand where ownership's coming from, though, because trying to get out of the red, get yourself back in a good financial spot, and it may look rough at first, but I can totally. I get what you have to kind of do to somewhat get around those financial losses and kind of get back.
Let me give you a look at what this thing looks like, and you'll see just how exciting this is.
Oh, lovely.
Yikes.
Isn't that awesome?
Holy cow.
Reminds me of the soccer jerseys back, probably going 40 years ago, when you approach someone for sponsorship, and that's how they got the word out for who was sponsoring the soccer teams. But those were kids soccer leagues, right?
Yeah.
AYSO leagues. Yeah, that's what we call them in the States.
Just so everybody gets a view of this one, this is the absolute sham of it all.
Holy smokes!
Isn't that ridiculous?
Whew.
You even realize they're from Brampton?
Yeah, honestly, as a newbie to lacrosse in general, I would not know where that team's located just with that big advertisement right there.
Because what it's done is just taking the cities out of it, and the cities are basically what this is all about. So, I really, for the life of me, I'm yeah, a little beside myself on this one. Can't wait to see the home opener on Sunday and see what the reaction of the longtime goers are.
My gosh!
Say underneath the juice thing, there's something in green. What does it say?
Excelsiors, which is their real name.
So just the team nickname is on there.
Now, just to keep it a little bit off G-rated, Steven Stamp got a hold of this one, and he's now calling them the Brampton BJs.
Yeah, I don't want to do that.
The Orangetown BJs and the Brampton BJs are now mixed teams here in the
mature audiences only. If that happens.
Big job. That's all I can say. Big job. The big jobs are there. You know?
Yikes.
Well, let's get on to real things. We had a final series begin this past weekend. I was lucky enough to be there live and watch all the hoopla and the festivities and all the other fun stuff and the bands and all the other things that took place before the game.
Nice.
On the bagpipes and all the other great things that came on, and then a game began, and then well, if we didn't already crown Christian Del Bianco the next big thing, I think we can pretty much crown Christian Del Bianco the next big thing. What do you think, Sue?
Well, I'll tell you, I really thought that the game would go, before the game started, I thought the game's going to go in Buffalo to Buffalo and in Calgary to Calgary, fight it out in game 3 for, who brings it home. But I have to say that for Calgary, I mean, they were tight. There's no doubt about it. And their defense, I mean, there were a lot of clear shots. I mean, I don't think that I can remember one shot that, he didn't have line of sight for. There were a few that went in and so forth, but you'd expect that. However, the same can't be said for Vince. I think that the Buffalo team that we saw play on Saturday night was not the Buffalo team that we're used to seeing. And the O had a hard time getting it in the net. I mean, it was a game that we thought would be, low scoring, and by the end of the first and the second, before the half, it was the low scoring game that it was, but it was tied. After that, it seems after the half, it seems like Buffalo really fell apart, and their defense in particular was horrible, and they did a really bad job of protecting the players, and they let guys like Dobie in alone. So, in some of those cases, I would say to you that, Calgary was on the ball, and Buffalo went off at the break and just never came back. It was not the game that I thought it was going to be. It was a good game. I'm not going to take that away with it, but it's not the usual. It wasn't the 14-4 Buffalo team that we've seen all season long. I think this was probably what I would rate as the among the top of their worst performances. Now, I'll also say that for both teams, because they'd only played once, there's not a lot of film on them. And the film that they do have on Calgary does not include Jesse King.
True. Jesse King was injured most of the year.
Exactly. So the team that they played back in February was not the team that has peaked at the end of the season. So, they're not used to
But to be a devil's advocate, I don't think Josh Byrne was playing in that game either. And Calgary had answers for him. So
yeah. So I mean, it was a completely different team. I think that this week going in, there is film, and I'll bet my bottom dollar that they're going to go into this week watching all that film and trying to scale out and flesh out where Del Bianco's weaknesses are, where the weaknesses are in the defense, and how they're going to get the ball in the net.
Alan, what do you think?
You know, I was not able to see the game on Saturday, but I will say this though is I kind of felt like Buffalo may have come into this game kind of a bit overconfident, maybe a little bit too much cockiness, a little too much swag behind them, perhaps, because we know about the regular season. We all know that regular season records in any sport mean nothing when you get to the postseason party.
Exactly.
And I just kind of, that was in the back of my mind, even though I thought that the Bandits were going to win this game, maybe not handily, but win the game because they've played so well at KeyBank Center all season. But normally when a team like Buffalo or a team that has a great regular season and it's been top dog all season, you kind of sometimes can sense that there may be some overconfidence, like, oh, this is a cakewalk, this is a walk in the park, and they don't play to their full potential. Now, as you guys said, the game was tied, but I think that Calgary they may have perhaps even sensed that Buffalo was a bit too overconfident in this game, and they took advantage of it. And again, all the props to Calgary, again, Reese and Dane, and as I think Kevin put a great story out about Christian Del Bianco, who is probably, if the Roughnecks win this series tomorrow, better win Finals MVP, because his play on Saturday, and if it continues tomorrow or in Game 2, should just lock up Finals MVP in my mind for him. And as we both said, though, or as everyone also said, is both teams didn't have their full squads earlier on in the season when they played each other. And Jesse King added 4 points in the game. And, of course, Dane and Reese got their points as well. I do think that if there is one player I would hope has a better game for the Bandits, is definitely Sean Evans. 1 goal, 3 assists in the game. If he gets going a bit better, if he's able to put a few more in there, maybe it helps out their offense. But I think I more so think of this as Buffalo being just a wee bit overzealous coming into this game with how they had played all season, honestly.
Now, one thing that happened in this game that went against what the Bandits do all year, the Bandits are known, especially Sean Evans, known for flopping around. And the refs let him play. And there were a number of things that I thought should be called that weren't called. Dave Smith's not one to look for calls or complain about calls. And even he was looking up and around because he had a couple of face masks and a few other things that went on. Buffalo definitely got frustrated, especially midway through, coming out of the half, but midway through the third, they really got frustrated. And it showed. It showed they're playing. But Calgary figured something out. Well, close to the midway point of the third quarter, they really figured something out. And they worked with it, and Dane Dobby was the one who was the guy who scored all the goals for that.
6 points.
He went in there three goals, 3 assists, but he scored 3 in a row, and they were all going in on Vince. And something that Toronto didn't learn the week before: you're not going to shoot from 40 feet out and beat him.
Right.
You're going to have to go in, make him move, and make him commit. And that's exactly what they did. And they were willing to pay the price going inside. And Buffalo didn't have an answer. Tavares did say in the press conference afterwards that Buffalo they had a number of shots because they were leading in the shots, at the end of the game.
They outshot him by 11 and still lost.
Yeah,
right.
But their selection was bad. Calgary blocked a lot of shots. Their defense was stunning, getting into lanes. Del Bianco was the first one to give them credit, making Buffalo take bad shots by getting into their lanes continuously.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of things that deflected off of players.
The other thing I want to point out is that it's very rare that we don't see Dane Smith score. The Great Dane, as they call them.
Yeah.
We do not. We rarely don't see him score. And I'll tell you that the Calgary defense was on him like there was no tomorrow. So he didn't get in. It was probably one of the few games that he was left off the score sheet. It's rare for him not to score. So they did a good job of being on their man. Although they, I mean, Calgary did a good job of being on their man. But that wasn't reciprocated because Dobie was left open, numerous times. Not a guy in sight.
So here's a question also, a little bit off topic, but the final goal, the empty net goal, Mitch Wild comes down, scores. The game's already settled, so the goal doesn't need to go in.
For
But
sure.
then he takes a boarding a call. Ian McKay just shoves him clear into the boards. He's hurt. He's limping off. Does this set a little tone, a little precedent for game two?
I think so. I think so. I mean, as oftentimes as I've done, even with Seals games, or of course, hockey's pretty much close to it, is when a play like that happens, that doesn't go unnoticed. And honestly, does it perhaps result in, some more harder shoves, maybe some type of line brawl breaks out, maybe? I don't know. But believe me, though, I mean, it's in the back of those guys' minds that they saw that happen, like, okay, note taken for the next game. And honestly, just, hey, let it go. I mean, the guy put in an empty net. That's his job. I mean, he's got a wide open net. You guys didn't do your job on offense. There's no need to go to those extremes or that level. And above all else, you got a major. Oh, yeah, and you got tossed from the game, too. So, but I do believe, though, it is in the back of those guys' minds. So it'll be interesting to see what happens when those two perhaps do, in fact, go against each other coming up in game two, though. Believe me.
No, with Calgary, you got to give them credit for this. There wasn't one player that went after McKay. They went to check on their player. They went to do the last minute.
Smart.
And all business. All business.
Right. Yeah.
So I think that a lot of us are underestimating Calgary.
Yeah.
Because, that's a really good team. And I had I had all evening to watch, especially from the broadcast booth, and I had a chance to watch them set up their plays and everything developing. And, really smart plays how to draw Buffalo in. And Buffalo fell for it almost every time.
And honestly, that's what Buffalo did to San Diego in the last regular season game, too, when they came here in late April. And Calgary didn't really do that much against the Seals in the first round of the postseason. But as the game progressed, they got better. They had clamped down on offense, better on defense. And that's what I think they brought to the table. The entire postseason run has been making adjustments at the right time, especially if they're behind the eight ball for halftime, and then they come out guns a-blazing in the third and fourth quarter when it really, honestly matters the most.
Yeah, I agree. Sue?
Well, I think just going back to the boarding call, it was really unnecessary. It was sort of what I would.
Absolutely.
It was completely unnecessary.
Absolutely.
It was so close to the end of the game. So, what for?
And the ball was already in the net.
And what for? Like what they got the boarding penalty, but the game was just about over. So why even go for it? I just thought it was a pot shot.
Agreed.
Will that be what we see? I think that was something that you already, put the hammer on the nail on earlier. I think, in my opinion, the frustration that we saw from Buffalo that came out. So it happened, and it was pure frustration on their point, but it was an unnecessary move. It was a stupid move. It really was.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. Now, one of the other things that storyline was when it was 2-2, I believe it was Dan McRae, the captain of the team, going down with one heck of a transition goal, almost did a corkscrew around Matt Vince to score. Now, if that doesn't pump your team up, I don't know what will.
And it's not that often that Dan scores.
Not at all, no. And, for him to make that kind of an effort, because he paid the price going towards the net.
He got the job done, though.
That he did, and there's a reason why he's wearing a C, isn't it?
No kidding.
But there were a number of things in that game that were like, wow. Just the way the Calgary had set things up. And like I say, in the second half, it looked like they had figured out the Buffalo scheme, and they were using it to their advantage. Buffalo got a couple of late goals to try and make a comeback. Josh Byrne had a couple in a row. Pretty nice goals at that. Also, good reason why he was a number 1 draft pick 2 drafts ago. But too little, too late. And Del Bianco was stellar, absolutely stellar. Like, he plays it down in his interviews, but he was absolutely phenomenally and close. The reflexes on this kid. I watched it in the playoffs and through Minto last year, and he stole the Minto Cup away from the Brampton Excelsiors juniors because he was unbeatable in that series. So and here we go again.
The question in everybody's mind at this point is that, they were strong, and Buffalo fell apart in the third, or after the half. They fell apart. Certainly they were out of the game in the fourth. There was, hope at that one point when they did the penalty call and there was a goal that went in. They were hoping that it was going to be a no goal.
Yeah, this was a major thing.
That would have changed the whole, and they would have been back in the game. Now, was he actually in the crease? Would it have made a difference if he had a pair of black shoes on instead of a pair of white shoes on? Hard to tell. It was pretty damn close.
From the angles that I saw after the fact, it looks like the call was correct. But my God, at the speed that went live, that's a pretty gutsy call. That's a very gutsy call, because there's no way I couldn't tell that at the regular speed. Yeah. And white shoe, white line, yeah. But and then it actually was the right call by calling it inconclusive, because you could tell, but you already waved it off on the field, so you had to go with it. It just happened to be that Calgary took it down and scored the other way, so it's a 2-goal swing. And yeah, it's huge. And that was your TSN turning point, so to speak.
For sure. I thought Major League Baseball was bad with replay, but again, as a newbie learning the NLL and learning the game of indoor lacrosse is there a way that we could perhaps speed up the replays in general? Because I feel like that there were a lot of times in the season that we were sitting around waiting for calls that maybe should have been just called on the field without having a review done. Again, I know about the challenge system and stuff. And also, am I the only one that says we should throw out the review of a goal in the last 2 minutes of the fourth quarter when it's a wide open net?
I agree with you. When it's obvious, right? Like that's kind of ridiculous. But unfortunately, when you're talking about reviews, it's up to the referee, and he's in communication with the booth and going frame by frame by painstaking frame by frame, even though we all have seen it 14 times in the arena and have seen it clearly that it's a goal or not a goal. Maybe. So I don't know. There's also the fact that when it's not a goal, they also have to get the time right to reset the clock. So there's a couple of factors in there. But yeah, I agree. Sometimes it just takes too long, and sometimes I don't even know what they're reviewing anymore.
Same here.
So let's just, going back sort of 4 or 5 years ago, before they implemented the better jumbotrons in most of the arenas, and we had the smaller ones, because my seats are directly behind the bench, the penalty bench, and at one point in time, I could stand up and look directly down at the camera at what the ref was reviewing, because it was not shown on the jumbotron, and I could tell whether it was a goal or no goal at that point in time before everybody else could find out. So they went from sort of one extreme to the other. I do like the new way that they're doing it so that everybody can see it, because I think it shows different angles and it shows exactly what the ref is taking a look at. How the question is that there are some refs, not all of them, but there are some refs that were out there, and is it necessary to spend 5 minutes reviewing a goal.
Thank you.
Well, Chris Williams just wants to make sure that his hair is settled. He's all about his hair. He's the one who takes his helmet off to go and take a look at a video review. So.
So I agree that there's something that needs to be done about but it's not consistent with all of the refs that just take a much longer time. And you know what? You see the plays. Make the call. You don't need 5 minutes when everybody else has already just determined what the call is. You don't have to look at it for another 3 minutes after the first 2 minutes already counted. But it's inconsistent in the league. So there are some calls that come down really, really quickly, and then there are others, depending on who the refs, who's in charge, that have a habit of taking a much longer time.
Very true. Now, I think one of my favorites is when two officials on the floor can't seem to get it together. So they have an officials challenge. It's not a bench challenge, it's an officials challenge. So they're going to look at it for themselves to see if it's good or not good. And then they deem it inconclusive and they go with the senior official on the floor. So that's a whole lot of wasted time, in my opinion.
Jeez Louise. As if we need to waste any more time during the course of a game, right?
Well, that's exactly, like we already have enough. Like we have these TV timeouts when there's no TV. So what more would you want?
Yeah. No, the TV timeout for the commercials we can't watch.
Yeah, for the ones that are knocked out for a BR Live that they black out anyways. So unless you have Altitude or Comcast or something like that, you're not seeing a commercial anyways. But we have a TV timeout. That's great.
Or whenever we're on local KSWB Fox 5 here, we'll get those too regardless. I mean, we get it regardless down here too, but we've had like 3 or 4 home games on local television here too. So either way, we get them regardless.
Ah, the good old days. Sue, you remember when we used to get games on TV?
Oh, yeah. Like a million years now, but and my beef with the TSN days, and by the way, I love Claude Fay. But my deal with them was, so you buy TSN, you buy the TSN channel, and the game comes around, and the day of the game, you find out it's not TSN, it's on TSN2 or TSN3 or TSN4, and you don't have those channels. And it drove me crazy because, as a satellite user, I'd have to call Bell then and say, okay, I need TSN, whatever the channel is, and I'd have to pay for it for a whole month. And normally 9 times out of 10, the next game that was played is on a different TSN channel.
I find the funny thing is the TSN actually is TSN4 is the main TSN. Wouldn't that be TSN1 in most people's eyes?
TSN,
You would think.
And TSN2, TSN3, TSN4. But it didn't matter. There was no consistency on where the game was played. And inevitably, what really got me was that Bell would come back and would say, it's going to take between 2 and 24 hours for the channel to kick in. The game would be starting, and I'm thinking, I'm chomping at the bit, and I'm ticked because, in my review that, where they posted online, here's where it's going to be on. It's going to be on TSN. It never said TSN2, TSN3, TSN4.
They just told you TSN.
They just said TSN, and you didn't find out closer to the game that it was on another TSN channel. That drove me crazy.
And on the other 4, you had World Championship darts that were pre-recorded 3 weeks ago at England.
And it's a repeat broadcast that goes over and over and over and over again. There's nothing any new.
I think one of my favorite TSN moments was it was a Toronto-Edmonton game. That shows you how long ago it was. And already it was a 10 o'clock, 10:30 start. And they had NCAA Tier 14 hockey, and it was a 5-1 score in the middle of the third period.
And they didn't bother to leave the game. They stayed with that game all the way through.
That game until the very end, and then we tape delayed it, so I got to watch the game from the very beginning. So is it that basically when the game was over, I went to work. Nice, like that.
Yeah.
Some of my favorite times.
And honestly, that's been kind of I would say the best thing, but a beautiful thing about the Seals this season is they kind of took a gamble on our local Fox affiliate here, KSWB Fox 5 San Diego, to televise, I think, 3 or 4, maybe 5 home games in the middle half of the season. But they also did this thing called Seals in 30, where they took the whole game and compacted it down to 30 minutes. So they took a game from the previous week and condensed it down to 30 minutes. It was from start to finish, all the goals, the big plays, whatnot. And honestly, for a team, and I think that's what kind of maybe other teams might want to look at is maybe, is who needs ESPN or Fox or any national markets. Look at, the local, I don't know if you guys in Toronto gets, if it's CBC or, somebody locally, don't go with, the big bad wolves of the national market. Look internally at the local market. And the Seals also, they took a leap of faith too on Spanish language television the whole season. And we had an English team and a Spanish team, and practically they had used a lot of the footage that they had used for goal highlights on Twitter were with the Spanish audio, which of course adds another dimension to it. And of course, and only that too, trying to expand the Seals brand, obviously first year franchise across San Diego, but also trying to tap into to our neighbors in Baja California, which I thought was a very, very genius idea. And I think it actually worked out very well because the guy next to me on press row was in charge of that station and in charge of the crew. And they were having just a great time covering the team all season long. But again, who needs national? Look internally at local markets for television if you want, in fact, get, these games on television.
Definitely. I think San Diego, the way they handled themselves from the time they were incepted till now, have done one thing after another that's been fantastic. I don't know if you want to call it cutting edge. I don't know if you want to call it reinventing, but they've done it. And they've done it from grassroots all the way up. This is textbook on how to build a franchise correctly.
Exactly.
And from the drafts onward, how they've handled it, and their TV and their media and their marketing and everything else that goes with it, everything has been a score. I really don't see any false, stray shots anywhere.
I'm curious as to, because it was completely different from the way that Philadelphia handled it. And, Philadelphia is a market that had lacrosse for years and years and years as well. So if going into the expansion draft that we had the first season, I would have thought that, Philadelphia, they're a lacrosse town. They've had lacrosse before, it's come back. I would have thought that they would have been much more successful at what they did versus what San Diego did. San Diego, was a trailblazer. So my curiosity comes into play as to whether or not the two teams that are coming into the league now, whether, like, let's take New York, because Rochester's a little bit different, but let's look at New York. Will New York use some of the tricks of the trade that happened with San Diego?
Yeah, true. They paid attention.
If they did, then it would be a smart move. Now, Rochester's a little bit different because, they had a team, albeit a team that didn't do well and left the season ticket holders more than a little flat. But they
Been there, done that.
already have, a really strong base. It's just about putting the team together. I think that they already have the fans still there. And
Yeah, I think they're just waiting to come back to a team that they know is going to stick around, because they had a lame duck year and none of them expected anything. And when they actually put together a win streak, it was like, wow, what a bonus.
Right. So when you look at the expansion draft from a realistic point of view, you have an existing market that had a team that's moving, and you have a brand new team coming in. So it's not the same kind of, it's similar to Philly, but not so similar, because Philly was a few years without having lacrosse at the Wells Fargo Center versus Rochester, who had the team here this year and they'll have a team there next year. So there's no time in between. But
Right.
I think a lot of it though comes down to front office, and San Diego with Patrick Merrill in there had the right guy. Paul Day, everybody looked at his Peterborough stuff from MSL, and yeah, they've won things, but don't forget Peterborough was the only one paying the players, so they had all the best players coming to their team. So you could suit up 37 players, and you're going to find your 15, 18 players you need at different times throughout the year, and they're going to win.
Right.
And that's exactly what they did. When it came down to doing this, I looked more at when Paul Day was originally with the Edmonton Rush. It took Derek Keenan a number of years to dig out the hole that Paul Day had made there, which Edmonton was finishing 1-15 in those years.
Oh.
They were the laughing stock of the league, and they survived it. And now with Keenan, they're flourishing over in Saskatchewan.
Right. Do we think that Paul Day is going to continue in Philly?
Yes. Yes, I don't have a doubt in my mind that he's staying there, both as coach and GM. He's not going to fire himself.
Yeah, it's true.
Oh, that's true. But
I mean, I would think that if Philadelphia gets off to the same start they were last season, and again, I know that he's both GM and head coach, but I know, and again, this is probably the downside of being owned by a owner who has, I guess, bigger and better priorities, a la the Flyers and maybe the 76ers, is would Comcast have enough gall to fire Paul if, in fact, the Wings get off to another 0-8, 0-9 start, or revoke one of his tags? You know, okay, focus on being a coach, we'll find a different GM, or you be the GM, we'll find a different coach. Or does it go to option C? We're like, okay, Paul, enough's enough. Seriously.
And I think that's where the owner has to step in.
Unfortunately, with a big corporation, that gets to be a little messy.
Yeah.
Unless you have a president who's hands-on, I guess really, really messy. But again, they'll bring up the thing of how many 1 and 2 goal games were Philadelphia in, and they were in quite a few. So a twist of fate here and there, maybe a little more experience on a defensive core, because I know the 2 Toronto games, both of them should be victories to Philadelphia,
and they should have beaten San Diego.
So there you go. There's already 3 or 4 wins throughout the year that and there was a number of other ones which were close and that they could have pulled out, plus the ones they had. So before you know, we're talking about an 8-8 team. So, if I were them, what I'd be looking at first in my drafting would be a goalie, because they have
because I think that you cannot have a revolving door in the net throughout the regular season, or even the playoffs for that matter. Now, the hockey team I work for, we've had a revolving door because one guy's been hot, one guy's been not, and then we've had both of them playing even Steven. But I just think that revolving doors in goal, especially, like what Philadelphia was in last year, is that just can't happen. I mean, you need to find a consistent number 1 starter.
Yeah.
Well, your first thing, you drafted a number 2 goalie right away in David DeRuscio.
Correct.
He never ever looked to me like he was going to be a number 1 goalie, and to this day, I still don't think he's a number 1 goalie. You took Buchan, who he had in Peterborough, but while Matt Vince and Evan Kirk, while they were playing the finals last year, they needed a goalie. He was there, and he had the same problem as Alex Bouquet had. The nets in MSL are a wee bit smaller. They're 4x4, and those couple of inches is the difference between the ball going in a top corner or the ball going into the corner of the rink. And in MSL or WLA, that's what would happen is they would go into the corner of the rink, and your goals against look stellar. In the NLL, those catch the top corner, and they're all goals.
Every time.
And that happened to Alex Bouquet. That's why he's a backup again. And it happened to Doug Buckham, which is why you see Gowa Abrams coming from the middle of nowhere at the end of the year. Looked pretty good, too, for his last couple of games. I like him. I've seen him play a number of years over in MSL.
Right.
I never really picked him as being a number one goalie anywhere.
So we have a lot of conversations this week about goalies and stuff like that. And so, before we get on to who's going to win the next game, let's talk about, the expansion draft and the possibilities of who goes where. I personally think that Evan Kirk being on IR, when that happened and you listen to the conversation that was going on, the conversation included going outside to find someone else to do the net, to be in control of the net. But during that conversation, not once was Adam Shute in the dialogue. Okay, so now Adam Shute goes in the goal, and he does, I would say, for a goalie that had 0 minutes, okay.
Held his own.
I mean, it was a really calculated risk, but it paid off big time. And so I think that Adam Shute has, earned a respective scenario on being a possibility to going to another club.
For sure.
I also see the same thing in Steve Fryer. Okay, so Fryer has been all over the place, and he's been in the league for a long time. But Ward has had his personal problems, and he needs to be cut some slack, based on what was going on. But Fryer stepped up, and he also did a good job. And I think that I almost see the similarities between more with Fryer and Frankie than I do with Adam Shute and Frankie. Okay, so the Adam Shute thing is a little bit up in the air, because a couple of things. If in fact Evan Kirk is does not need to be protected because he's a free agent, then the smart move for Edmonton would be to protect Adam. But if Evan Kirk is not a free agent, then they're going to protect Evan Kirk, which leaves Adam Shute then exposed. Question is Evan a free agent or not? And to be honest with you, I haven't got the information on that yet. I believe he is, or he will be, but I'm not 100% certain.
See, the other one I would come to mind is here in Toronto with Riley Hutchcraft. He really didn't get much chance to play. In the time he did play, he actually played very well. Now, this brings me to another point, a secondary point, but one that's related to what we're talking about. And we had a couple of huge trades in MSL recently. And one was that the Brooklyn Redmen sent Mike Poulin to Peterborough.
Right.
Which now makes things interesting because Evan Kirk's taking the summer off anyways because wife's going to have a baby. So he's out. Sense. But Matt Mintz, I believe, is still part of that team. I don't know. But that does that mean a Buchan's out? But anyways.
The other
but that means that in Brooklyn, the number one goalie now is Riley Hutchcraft. So I got a feeling, being the draft in September, he has a good summer, and he might be on a move out of Toronto.
More than likely.
That's I think that would be his big audition. If he does great in MSL,
the reality for Toronto is we've had, Miller. We've had a whole stream of people that were, backups that have all gone, basically without any playing time, since the Watson change. And the truth is that the amount of playing time they're going to get in Toronto is limited to next to none. And so why would a guy who wants to contribute, want to sit back year after year after year? They want a chance too. And without getting any time to play, they're never going to, there's two things. They need to build up their skills in the NLL, but at the same time, the difference between the Minto and stuff like that is that they need to build up their confidence in the net playing in the NLL. And if they never get a chance, they won't ever get a chance to build up that confidence either.
Richard. I think San Diego drafted a goalie in the entry draft. Rylan Hartley, I think, was drafted, but he was out all year with a knee injury, I think, which really sucked because honestly, I thought Frank and Tyler were a good 1-2 duo. In fact, Tyler had to come in to spill Frank after a rough night at the office. Probably a bit more than maybe the loss should have allowed later in the season. But I think San Diego, in regards to the expansion draft, is going to be kind of interesting because there's so many. I feel like there's a lot of question marks on the roster right now about who they will protect, who they won't protect. And, of course, probably some guys that are probably taking it, probably more than likely stepping away from the game after their last season or this season.
I'm just going to go to Adam Shute one more because there was another interesting fact about him that's different to all of the other players. And we talked about, will they move from, the west to the east?
Sue and I had talked about this last week, by the way.
Oh, okay.
Right. So on Adam Shute has a PhD, and he is working at a hospital doing research. Well, if he goes, let's just say Kirk is not a free agent, okay, and they can't protect Shute. Well, Cornell University in Ithaca, New York, has an amazing research program. So his skills could be, possibly portable, and
right.
We know that in that scenario that guys in his position normally get paid more in the US than they do in Canada. So for him, if he were taken up by New York, it could be something that could be financially equitable on both fronts, because he's one of the few guys in the league that, first of all, how many guys, they're usually 9 to 5. They don't normally have a PhD. They don't normally work in research at the hospitals and stuff like that.
Right.
Guys, I think that there was one other guy that was a doctor.
You got two of them in Buffalo. You got the Desnu and you got Brownell.
Right. and where are they working?
Honestly, I'm not sure.
It's just a point because Shute does not work in Saskatoon. He works in Calgary, and he flies in and out. So the commute between Ithaca and Long Island is, comparatively speaking, a piece of cake. It's not going to be a whole lot difference, but monetarily, it could make a huge difference for him, providing Evan Kirk is not a free agent and they don't protect him.
You also have to look at in the one place where I wouldn't put anything past anybody is in Saskatchewan, with Keenan as the GM. That is your evil genius. No one's going to put one over on him. So if he feels that people are going for Shute's going to be protected, and he'll expose Kirk.
And like I said, Gary, Susan and I had talked about that last week. Is the event that I joined you and Sean on back on May 2nd from the downtown hotel. The guys that were there, so Buchanan, Soroketti, and Brandon Clellan, all said, yeah, when we first came here, before we all bought property, we all were flying in and we were staying at this hotel. So literally the place that we were hanging out at was the team hotel. And even there was a game or a day, I think, when I had a hockey playoff game at Pechanga Arena, and all the Seals players were hanging outside the eastern entrance of our arena, where I walk in to start my shift. And, they all were being driven in on those Mercedes-Benz Sprinters, those little, they look like little mini U-Hauls pretty much from the airport, because all these guys are flying in from either Canada or, in Cam Holding's case, from Michigan, because these guys have families and they're coaching or whatnot elsewhere. But a majority of the guys I did talk to, though, have all bought property here. So now they've all become San Diego residents now. But, that's what Susan and I were talking about last week. But Gary, I did want to bring this up, though, real quick, because, again, this is always a talking point I love discussing, is either expansion, realignment, or what we do now. Because obviously now we have a situation where the league is going to 13 teams next season, 8 East, 5 West. Gary, I know that we've heard a lot of rumblings. We've heard some stuff in the rumor mill that's been swirling for a while. First thing I want to touch base on, Gary, is 13 teams now, 18 games played out of 20 weeks. Does the schedule perhaps change now to accommodate where everybody plays each other at least once in the season?
I would love that myself. I would love that, because I really can't stand seeing one team 4 times and maybe seeing another team once. I hate that. I am a big proponent that we need a central division. I would keep the West the way it is, and the way the East is right now, I would probably put a division that would have Toronto, Buffalo, Rochester as a central division. One other team in there, and then I would probably be looking at the East being Halifax, the East being probably Georgia, Philadelphia, and New England. Then it'd be up to whether New York goes into the Central or into the East. It's really anybody's guess, but somewhere in that realm. One, travel would be a lot easier for everybody, and number two, I think that they could get a more fair schedule out of this thing. Yeah. Because if you're going to keep it East and West, I know the NLL wants to have as many teams as possible in their playoffs just for revenue's sake, even though the toughest thing to market is a 1 week away playoff game. Even Buffalo has trouble filling their arenas for these things. That's my theory on it, though. Because otherwise what's going to happen is you're going to have 7 or 8 team divisions, and the top 3 teams maybe make it in. So it's going to be like baseball. And that gets a little bit sticky.
And then I think the other point, though, too, Gary, more importantly, that Susan and I talked about is there's been, again, rumor mill's been swirling about possibly team more so looking to the West, maybe even the central of the U.S., Western Canada, Central Canada. The rumor mill has been filled with Las Vegas and Dallas, Seattle, Los Angeles, maybe somewhere else over there. But Gary, like I said, Susan and I talked about this, if you were in the commissioner's shoes for one day, Gary, where's maybe the couple of Western cities, maybe, or central cities, or somewhere, in Canada or the U.S. that you would say, as commissioner for a day, I'm putting a team in this city right here, right now for next season or the year after?
Well, where I have it, if I were the commissioner, one, Edmonton is already, is already a green light. All they have to do is say they're ready, and they get their team. The other one I would use, 2 of them. One is Seattle, because they go with the league's mantra of having an NHL team coming in there and being a proponent, mainstay at the arena. The other one would be San Francisco, and it being a travel hub, very easy for everybody to get there. That would be my 3. And look for it. I think that comes in ahead of Vegas. I think Vegas was the flavor because of the way they did last year.
Yeah,
but I don't think that's really the big thing. I think San Francisco's coming in ahead of that, and I really think that Seattle's on the next swing.
But I also believe that Houston and Dallas are also hubs that can't be overlooked.
Dallas
has different airports. Dallas has 2 big airports that he can go in and out of easily.
Dallas had the basketball guy all over that one because Jerry Jones has the Rattlers, the field team. So that's still in play. A couple of people who are part of that thing, I still have conversations with. So not much is happening with that, but it was moving forward for quite a bit. So it seems to have stalled for the time being. But it's definitely coming to an arena near you soon. So
Hopefully sooner than later, because the more the merrier at this rate for me.
I'm thinking that it's probably not in this next swing of things, but maybe in 2 swings from now. Because, David's wants at least 20 to 30 teams. So we're going to have a few more of these yet.
Yeah. So,
all right. So
who do you pick, Gary, for the win in Calgary?
Well, I'm going against the norm here, because I'm going with Calgary. I think that Calgary is going to find a way, because they know that if they go back to Banditland they'll get 19,000 for that game 3. It'll be an absolute insanity asylum in there, and I don't think that they're going to bode very well if Buffalo is able to win game 2 and go with the momentum back into that. So I think this is, even though they're up 1-0, I think they're going to take the mindset that this is do or die. And when you have a goaltender like Christian Del Bianco that can steal one for you at any time, you have defensemen that are bruising like a Chad Cummings. You have the Dutch, Dobie, Dixon, the D's, the Dan Taylors. You have these guys in there. I think that they can put together a really good plan to, again, frustrate the Bandits. And with Kurt Malosky, who's not new to this at all, as your coach, I think he's going to be able to keep these guys pretty well business as usual. And I'm going with them. Now, selfishly, like I said in the pick'ems, selfishly, I want Buffalo to win because I want to be part of Banditland. Simple.
I actually chose Buffalo for this win, not because I don't think that Calgary can do it, because I do think, but selfishly, I'd like to see game 3 happen, because that gives me 2 more games instead of 1.
She's not ready for lacrosse withdrawals. I don't blame her.
So, I think that, Buffalo is going to make sure that they know where they're going. Calgary is going to, is not by any chance going to make it easy for them. But if Buffalo were to win, in that case, we would have an extra game. We would have the game 3. Statistically, okay, and I'm not normally the statistics person, but statistically, through the years, the team that won game 1 went on to win the championship. So, does it matter whether it's 2 games or 3 games? I'd like to stretch it out.
Yeah, I really want to get back to Banditland. I'd like to get back in the press box. I'd like to be part of that. I've been part of the last 5. I've been part of the championship thing and celebrations that go with it. So I think altogether I've been part of 11 over the years. So I'd like to keep it going, because I'm hooked on those celebrations. They're a lot of fun. A lot of work, but they're a lot of fun.
Exactly, they are.
Callan, what do you think? Oh, sorry, Sue. Go ahead.
I did pick Buffalo purely for selfish reasons. But I did pick them. Will I be upset if Calgary won? Absolutely not. If Calgary wins in Calgary, there's no doubt in my mind that MVP should slide over from Vince to Del Bianco.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, for a season-long MVP, the voting comes for the end of the year. It's only about the year. It has nothing to do with the playoffs. But your playoff MVP, I'm fairly certain, if it wouldn't be Dane Dobby, it would be Kristen Del Bianco.
Absolutely.
It would be travesty if it isn't Kristen Del Bianco.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm still going with Buffalo in game 2, because I think they got punched in the mouth, and now it's like, okay, now we're back to normal. And but I mean, I'm a lot like you guys. I think that I picked Buffalo, but if Calgary wins, I wouldn't be surprised. And again, if the Next win this one and they win in front of their home crowd at Scotiabank Saddledome, is that Del Bianco probably would win if there was or is a playoff MVP. He certainly gets my vote for that, because he's played stellar all playoffs long. I think that Buffalo, okay, they got slugged in the mouth. And now they're going to make their adjustments, and I expect them to come out a lot better, a lot harder in game 2. And Calgary's going to have to be ready, and they may have to play even better than they played in game 1 to take down the Bandits. So I'm going to go with Buffalo in game 2 to send it back to Buffalo once more. And Gary can be there again for another championship celebration for somebody.
Let's go.
We can all celebrate the Calgary championship.
Yeah, it's true. Absolutely.
Well, that won't make a very good party in Buffalo now, will it? Wait a minute.
I won't. Okay.
Wait a minute.
Yeah, I don't know if us San Diegans want to celebrate a Calgary championship. So we'll see what happens.
Well, it's kind of like Toronto wanting to celebrate a Buffalo one. It's just
Right.
it goes right.
Right.
Everything we
Right.
told for. Buffalo doesn't want to celebrate Toronto, and vice versa. But they have been very gracious. I got to give them that.
That's all that matters, man. That's all that matters.
All right. I guess that's it. Until we meet again next week, and we hopefully talk about Game 3. But for Cal McClurg and for Sue Walton, I want to thank everybody for joining us. We're here weekly, at least until the season's over. Remember, if you had any questions, just plop them into the question thing in the YouTube box there, and at one point or another, we might read them.
Eventually.
Well, we're still answering the questions from April, but that's okay. We're thorough. We're thorough.
Questions to the Lax Philly post on Facebook. We'll take a look at the Lax Philly Facebook post and see if there are any questions on it. We'll be happy to answer those that are posted.
That works for me.
We will do our best, believe me.
We have some of the greatest minds working on it, and me. On that note, I want to thank everybody again for sticking with us for the last hour and a bit. And until we meet again next week, enjoy all the lax you can. Take care, guys.
Good night.